Hi, welcome back to this lesson. Previously, we learned the differences between the JavaScript used in the browser versus the JavaScript used in Node.js. In this video, we will explore Node modules. Node modules is a very important concept in Node.js. First, we are going to start with what is Node modules. Node modules are a reusable piece of code that encapsulates functionalities and can easily be imported and used in other modules or scripts. Modules helps organize code into manageable units. It also promotes code reusability and facilitates collaborations amongst developers. Now, Node.js supports different formats for defining and importing modules. We are going to discuss CommonJS and ES modules in this particular video. Let's start with CommonJS, for example. CommonJS is the default module format used in Node.js. These modules are defined using the modules.export and require functions. Let's take a simple demo to see how we can create functions and import them or export them as modules. Now, let's visit our code editor that we will use for most part of this course. So we visit playground.masteringbackend.com. You are going to be greeted with a JavaScript environment like this, where you can practice JavaScript on the browser. So let's start by defining a simple function. First, let's start with calling this function add. Now it takes two numbers. So num1 and num2, and then let's return the addition of these two numbers. All right, so let's create another function here called subtract, which will simply be sub, and let's take in two numbers, 1 and 2. So here, I want to return the differences between these two numbers. All right, so assuming we have defined a function like this, or even a file that contains this function, just like what we have here, main.js, and we want to export these functions so that other parts of our program can make use of these functions that we've created. So doing this using the CommonJS format, we can use module.export. And of course, we can pass this function individually into this object. Okay, so doing this in Node.js is going to export this function, meaning that in another file in your project, you can reuse this code or these functions that you've created. So let's assume that this is file2.js right down there. So what we can do is to require, you can say cons, and of course we can say add and sub, and we are going to require these from this file. So let's call this file main.js, or maybe just main. All right, so let's add main.js. Okay, so we require these modules that we've created and we have exported them. Basically, we require them into this file too, and here we can make use of these functionalities right here. So as you can see, it's requesting for the parameters. So let's say 2 and 9. And down here, we can make use of the sub, which is 4 minus 1. Okay, so we can also console log this to see the results that we are going to have. All right, so basically, you can easily see how we can use the CommonJS formats to create modules or reusable piece of code in our project. Okay, so let's go back to the lesson and let's continue with the other formats that we have. Next, we have the ES model. Now, ES modules follows the ECMAScript script standard for module syntax. These modules are defined using the export and import keywords. So we are also going to take a quick demo to show you how you can make use of ES modules to create a reusable piece of code. So let's dive into the code editor. All right, so let's assume we have the same function. So I'm going to type out the function right here, assuming we have that in the main.js file. So we have add. This time we have same num1 and num2, and of course we do the calculation. Num1 plus number 2. All right, so let me repeat this for subtraction. Let's call this sub, and let's change this to the subtraction sign. Now, so how do we export this particular piece of code so that we can reuse it in another of our code? So what we can do if we are making use of the ES6 format is to simply add export right here. So we can add export here, and we can also do that right here. Now, what happens is that Node.js knows that this function will be used in different places in our code. So what we can do to make use of them is to also import them wherever we want to make use of them. So the first thing to do is, assuming we are making use of a different file, let's call this file.js, and we want to make use of these functions that we've created. So what we can do is to import them. So remember that in ES6, the format is export and import, no longer modules.export and require. Okay, so we can use import, and of course we can select each of the functions that we want to import, and we can import that from, of course, we pass in the URL to where the file is located. In this case, we are just going to say it's located in the same directory as this file.js that we have, and that is main.js. Okay, so once we've successfully imported these, we can make use of the functions as usual by simply saying console.log add, and then we pass in the numbers that we want to add, and we can also repeat the same thing for subtraction. So here we have sub, and let's make this first number greater. Okay, so there you have it. You can basically demonstrate this using your VS Code. In the previous lessons, we learned how to install and set up Node.js in your local machine. This is a quick example of how to make use of the different formats of modules that we have. So first we have the common JS modules, and also we have the ES modules, which is basically what we use now in Node.js JavaScript.